Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our next event in our virtual author series at the Westbury Memorial Public Library. I am your host, Michelle Marcus, reference librarian, and I explained to everyone here our housekeeping stuff and our rules. So I will move on, and um, I'm excited to speak to author Parini Shroff. Let me share a little more about her. She received her MFA from the University of Texas at Austin, where she studied under Elizabeth McCracken, Alexandra Chi, and Christina Garcia. She's a practicing attorney and currently lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Bandit Queens is her first debut novel. She was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2023. And this book is also an Indie Next pick, a Barnes & Noble Book Club pick, a GMA Buzz pick, and a Library Reads pick. Rini, thank you and hello for agreeing to do this virtual author visit with the Westbury Memorial Public Library. I'm so excited to discuss your debut novel, The Bandit Queens. I read and loved this book. I also learned so much and I went to look up things as soon as I finished the book. Could you please briefly share and tell us a little bit what your book is about, spoiler-free, of course, for our viewers who haven't read the book yet, a little introduction to the book.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. I'm very pleased. The Bandit Queens is a dark comedy. It follows Geeta as the main protagonist. She is a woman living in a village in modern day rural India. Everyone in her village thinks she killed her husband. She didn't, but it is a lie that she goes along with because she finds it to be economically beneficial. That is until the other women in her village and in her microloan group decide they too would like to become self-made widows, and they demand Geeta's help. And Geeta has to decide whether or not she's going to assist them in this morally dubious quest.
Okay, thank you. And I like, and I'm sure readers like to do so also, to go a little deeper into this book. And I was wondering if you could please share a little more with us, such as the themes of this book.
Well, a lot of the themes of the book, though the setting is very specific to the Indian village, the issues that it discusses are very ubiquitous and women face them worldwide. That includes like patriarchy, prejudice, discrimination. There's casteism in the novel. There's also themes of domestic violence and friendship between women as a sort of life raft to navigate these darker waters and these issues that are created by the presence of not only the patriarchy, but the very men in the village.
What was the origin of the story for this novel?
It's if and when you get to the author's note, forgive me, I'm repeating myself, but I was visiting my father and my brother and honestly my extended family in India in 2013. And at that point, my father was involved in microfinancing, in financing a microloan and the outskirts of Ahmedabad, which is the city where my family is from. So my brother, my father, and I, we took a day trip to drive out to this village, and we sat in on a microloan meeting. And my father had done that many times, but for me, it was a novel experience. And I knew I was participating, I knew I was observing something quite special. And I left knowing that I'd write about it. It ended up being a short story with Geeta, the protagonist, and Farah, who is another character who's very quickly introduced. I think she's in the first chapter. So that's, yeah, it was really much them. They're kind of, I wouldn't call it a friendship. It was like an economic alliance. Their relationship is really built on like money and distrust. But so that was 2013, and during the pandemic, I revisited the short story, and it's like a larger world just unfolded in front of me as I was reading. As I was reading, I had all these questions, and which comes from distance to the work. When you have enough distance, when enough time has passed, I had all these questions, and I thought, okay, this could be a novel. And that's when I broadened the cast of characters to include Saloni, to include Kushi, who is a character you comes across a little bit later, and the twins, Preeti and Priya. And then as this larger world unfolded, I began to like fill in the details of everyday village life. And as I did that, all these issues, such as domestic violence and casteism, they cropped up because it seemed organic. If I was walking in Geeta's shoes, if I was describing what the life of a woman in a modern day village in India was, it necessitated addressing these issues. And then I'm not really sure where the comedy came from, but I'm grateful that it did.
Oh my gosh, there's so many like great scenes that I recall that were so funny.
Oh,
Um,
good.
yeah. Um, let's see. So, you had told us that you've been to the area of India where this village is inspired by. It's not a real village. It was inspired by the area that you went to.
Yes. So the village in the novel is like a composite of various places. It is not the actual one where I sat in on the lone meeting because I didn't want to be beholden to any one fixed location.
Mhm. And how did you go about doing research for this book?
Well, the Band of Queens is my debut novel. I'm thankful for that, but it's not my first manuscript. And I think a lifetime of reading and researching other projects really informed this one, especially when it came to cast. A lot of facts and treatment and biases and prejudices I already knew from my time spent working on other projects. And so a lot of it was already done. And then Fool and Baby is a real life character, a real life historical figure who the women in the novel, the fictional women in the novel, use her real life story as a source of inspiration as the novel progresses. And while I, like so many South Asian folk my age and older, always knew the legend and the story of the Bandit Queen, just writing this novel necessitated like a deeper dive into her story rather than like a cursory, Wikipedia entry. So I read a few biographies, her autobiography, and let's see, and I actually watched some YouTube videos of people walking around with their cell phones in villages in India, and that's where I got to fill in a lot of the detail that I missed because it was 2020 and I wasn't allowed to travel. I couldn't go back to India, so that was a source that I wouldn't have expected, YouTube, but it ended up being quite fun. Yeah.
That's great. I found the female characters in the story so intriguing, especially the contrast between the main characters and what situations they found themselves in and how they dealt with their circumstances. And I also loved how each of the characters represented women from different backgrounds and circumstances. How do you decide to go about creating these characters?
You know, I get asked that from time to time, and it surprised me. I don't have as much control, I don't think, as people think I do. These women were very persistently talking in my head, and a lot of their dialogue would like fly out, and then I'd have to go back and kind of fill in staging, blocking, emotions, prose, right? Because the dialogue and the banter would be so rapid fire because they just seemed fully formed. Like Geeta was always who she was going to be, and it wasn't really. And Saloni too. My gosh, Saloni was just she wouldn't like she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't shut up. So she seemed to know who she wanted to be well before I caught up. And so there wasn't, I don't think it was a conscious decision. I think it was letting them, like being a conduit for them to speak through me, and me being like, all right, I can't control you clearly. So I'm just going to let you do what it is that you feel you need to do.
I just found Solani's like so like oh so fun to like he's a fun character. I'm like, oh my gosh. I feel like sometimes like you need a friend like her, you know? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
more like a little more quiet, a little more reserved like Gita, you would need someone a little more outspoken like her. But she's great.
Yeah.
Um so before you were talking about Mulan, and I've just found her very fascinating. And she's not actually present in the story, but her presence is nevertheless felt by Gita and some of the other main characters. And, in fact, I was so fascinated by her story, I went to the author notes before I even finished the story. So
Hmm.
you told us a little bit about like the research you did, but how did you learn about her? Is that
I
like,
can't remember ever not knowing about her. Like, as she is and was very famous throughout India. She was in the papers. Like, I don't remember when. I've always known of her.
and also like how much like that was in the story like is like I mean, because like like sometimes you hear like they hear stories and then sometimes the stories get exaggerated. I mean,
Mhm.
so did you want like the characters to kind of like tell her actual story, or sometimes just get exaggerated because you know how that is, like someone becomes a legend and they kind of exaggerate stuff. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I think whenever there are discrepancies, I try to address that in the novel itself by having a character be like, this is what they heard, but they're not sure if it's true because we can't really know. And I through the literature and through the materials that were available, I looked for the consistencies and I was able to like map out this linear narrative. But there's room for error. And I try to address that by having the characters be uncertain, but there's only so much that you can be certain of having not been a witness to her life.
And related to what we were talking about, especially like the role of women in these Indian villages, and also especially how lowercase women and lowercase people in general, how they're treated in small towns was very eye-opening. So I was just curious, are there any improvements in how the women are treated in these small towns today, and also the people of the lower case as well?
Do you say cast?
Yes, I meant to say yes. I said yes.
Okay. Well, India is huge, and not every village is the same. Like, a lot of villages are self-ruling. They have the panchayat, which I mentioned a few times in the novel, which is a local governing body consisting of 5 people, usually elders, who make decisions in issues that come up within the village, especially because they're so far removed from cities and courts. So they find like the self-governing really helps keep civility. That said, because of this like kind of autonomy, every village is different. There are some villages, and they are um, really few. They're rare, but they're very inspiring. They have decided within that village to eradicate caste. And reading these stories and these human interest pieces is really heartening because you see that it is possible. It's possible on a bigger scale, but unfortunately, it's not. That's the exception, not the rule. So caste is very, very much prevalent to the point where New York and California have recently amended their anti-discrimination to include caste because rather than eradicating, it's following the Indian community to the states. Um, so there's a lot of work to be done. So it's still very much an issue. In cities, it's a bit less on its face because there is anonymity, there's passing, there's the ability to pass. Um, that said, there's still a lot of heated debates about quotas and reserved seats for scheduled caste and other backwards classes, OBC as they're called, and the Dalit community, which is Kushi, a character, she is a Dalit woman in the village. So
Also, I was wondering if you could please share how you made the transition from lawyer to writer and your journey into becoming novel.
mm. Well, I think it'd be probably more accurate to say I made a transition from a writer to temporarily becoming an attorney. I've been writing in some form since I was like 6 years old. In fact, like right behind me is my first short story. It's called The Magic Hole. I wrote it when I was 6. My parents framed it. It's not very good, but parental love being what it is. So I've been writing ever since I could write. And then when I got my bachelor's in literature and creative writing, I didn't really know what to do. And when you don't really know what to do, law school is always there and I was good at reading and writing, and that the practice of law has a lot of reading and writing. So I went to law school, and then I practiced as an attorney until I paid off my law school debt. Then I quit my firm and I moved to Austin to get my master's in fine arts and creative writing, which is where I studied under Elizabeth and Alex Chi and Christina Garcia. And then after I graduated, I knew that I needed to work part. At least I knew I needed to return to law in some capacity to like pay the bills while I continued to write. So I decided to look for a part-time position. So I would treat law as my part-time job and I would treat writing as my other part-time job, and together kind of create like a full-time discipline for myself.
Okay, very good. Did you know the ending for this book before you started writing? And also, I guess more to elaborate, basically this will show more like you probably heard this a plotter or a pantser, like somebody like plans all the whole thing out or just kind of goes along, has a basic idea, but they kind of just go along and see what happens with the characters and everything.
Yeah. I don't outline. I had no idea where I was going. And I got away with it for the first 28 chapters, but by the time the last two chapters came, I was stuck. And the last two chapters took as long as the rest of the book in its entirety to write did. And I think I went through like maybe 18, 20 drafts of the last two chapters before we finally settled on what came out. That was hard, especially since the first 28 came so fluidly, seamlessly. I got spoiled, and then I was so stuck. I was like, can we just publish it without an ending? Like, can we just stop? I can't do this anymore. But then, it happened. So no, I had no idea. Because I don't outline. I never know what they're gonna do because, like I mentioned, that my characters don't really listen and they have agendas of their own. So I let them be.
Very good. One thing I was going to say is, about Dog Bandit. That was a cute character. How'd that come about?
In 2020, I was living with my fiance in an in-law unit, and our landlords got a dog during the pandemic. But the way the property was juxtaposition and the yard and all that, Cookie, their dog, spent way more time at our unit than they did in the main house. And so I've never had a pet before. So this was like my first consistent exposure to a dog or having like that kind of relationship. And I think Cookie's existence and Cookie's presence just kind of wormed its way into the fictional world too, because there was Bandit, and I had no idea. I knew that Geetha was going to have. I'm trying to be spoiler free. I knew that Geetha was going to have an interaction with a dog, but I had no idea that Bandit was going to be kind of, as you said, a character. Yeah. But now I feel like I shamelessly manipulated people because, like, come on, if there's a dog, you're probably gonna like win hearts. So now I'm like, oh.
I'm sure listeners, including myself, would love to hear what you're currently reading, and also, can you share a few titles, please?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I am. Okay, let me see. I've written some down because every time I get asked, every book I've ever read flies out of my head, and so I'm now prepared, thankfully. I recently read Animal by Lisa Taddeo, and I absolutely loved it. It's not for the faint of heart. It's incredibly visceral, but it is like a wild ride. I love that book. I also love anything by Emily St. John Mandel. I think she's just brilliant. And the same goes with Zadie Smith and Maggie Shipstead and Elizabeth Strout. I'm a huge Elizabeth Strout fan. And then right now, I just finished Little Monsters by Adrian. I'm blanking on the last name. Yes. And then I just began Yellowface, which is wild. I'm really liking the immersive first person voice. I admire it. I'm not a first person writer myself, at least not yet, but it is just you from the first page, you are in June's head, and it's like it's dark in there, but it's fun.
Yeah, no, that one, Yellowface is definitely on my list, and Little Monsters as well. So those are some really good suggestions. Also, I was just wondering if you could share anything about what you're writing next.
Yes, I am working I don't outline, so I don't know what it's going to be. But right now it follows a couple in their mid 40s who've been married long enough where they're they're more there's no animosity, but sometimes the familiarity, they seem more like furniture to each other. And inadvertently, they stumble upon a human trafficking ring. And in deciding what they're going to do and in getting themselves out of this mafia position, they kind of rediscover each other and things that they didn't know about each other. And it is another dark comedy. So we'll see if anything comes of that.
Oh, really good. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to open it up if anyone has questions for Parini. If you want, you can put up the raise hand icon, and then I'll take you as I see it on the screen. Okay, so Sharon first. So Sharon, if you'd like to ask a question, please.
Yes, hi. I'm about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through, and I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you.
I also have a tendency to listen to it and read it at the same time, depending on if I'm in the car, I listen and then I catch up on reading and that type of thing. I have to say I didn't really read the cover because I started listening first, so I'm going, this is funny. Is this supposed to be funny? So, and then I realized that it had, like things were happening that you really put that in there, which I found so interesting with how dark some of it is as far as what's going on. And and some of those issues that are going on with you even mentioned it, domestic violence and that type of thing. And then yet there's this really funny type thing. So I did appreciate that. I do have a question. Did you have to research, and I don't think I'm giving anything away, methods that might prove fatal?
Yes, good question. Okay, I did, but back when it was a short story. By the time I got to the novel, I know I'd already in 2013 I'd researched that because I think I know what you're getting at. So that I did that research already. So I was like, okay, I don't have to look this up. I know that it is effective.
And I have one more question, and then or some comment question. I found that this group of women was definitely from India with the language and some of the things that were cultural to that. But I also thought it could be written without some of that and take place in the U.S.
Yes,
and I'm wondering
absolutely.
if that was an intention or.
Yeah. Yes, I'm so happy that you mentioned that because I don't often get to talk about that. It is the dialogue, though I mentioned they're not speaking in English, they're not speaking in English. The jokes are very American and the punchline and the beats are very American. And that's because I wanted readers to think that they could be overhearing their own friends. I wanted you to kind of think like, okay, yes, the setting is this, but they could be anywhere, but for, these very grounded details in culture and country. And this is before I knew I'd be fortunate enough to be published in other countries. I knew that with my agent, it was going to be North American audience. And so I had that in my mind too. I was like, I want the reader, wherever they are, to just feel like they could be overhearing any group of friends.
Thank you.
Now, Susan, if you'd like to ask your question, please. Oh, you're on mute, Susan?
Got it. Okay. I just sort of have a comment. I started reading the book, and then I love listening to audiobooks. That's my favorite. And I have to say that anybody that read the book and hasn't done the audiobook, I strongly urge them to do so, because I was like listening and then somehow I picked it up again listening. And like this morning, it was fun hearing the twins discussing their situation. And it was so fun hearing them say, like, you were mom's favorite, you were. And I remember one of them said, I was supposed to get the earrings to wear at the wedding. And you had to me, this is just my opinion, you really have to hear that and hear it from them in their village. And I usually, when it's a book like that or a book discussion, I will read the book, and I will read the book. I will finish it. And it's really important to listen, because you get the correct pronunciation of certain words. Like the word for witch, I looked up, I don't know how to pronounce, CER, something like that. That
Churel.
word for witch, how do you pronounce? I'm sorry.
Churel.
Yeah, that's what she was called. But I looked up the word. So I'm just saying that when you hear the audio, you get the right pronunciation. And it just, to me, I'm sort of in India with them, watching and listening. And I really enjoyed it so much. And just as an aside, those micro loans, those little loans that people have, I think a few years ago, someone actually won a Nobel Prize for
Yes, you
that.
saw.
Yeah, for that idea.
Yes.
So I just like seeing another part of the world. But I have a question. I just realized I have a question. What was it like? What was like an average day hanging out in that village? And how did they spend the day other than gabbing and all that kind of thing? And how did they get their food? In other words, they have little markets, or what's it like? Because I have no idea what it's like in a village like that.
Yeah. Well, there are shops, and it's a farming town, so there'll definitely be some bartering.
Right,
There'll
produce,
be
right,
you'll
right.
right. You'll
Mhm.
have a shop, like in the novel. There's like a row of shops where people can get sundries.
Right.
It'll take a walk, but it's there.
Okay.
You spend your time, like, you grind your spices, you grind
Oh,
your mill, you grind all of that. You spend time. You also have to find like fuel. Like a lot of it is making the very things that we have kind
oh,
of just at hand.
right.
Because I mean, every meal there's like the refrigerator angle, right? There's no
That we would we would
so there's no
order on
leftovers.
Amazon.
Yeah,
What
there's no
kind
meal prep. It's like every meal is fresh and then eaten. And so
Right.
if you're a woman, that's your day. And then on top of
Oh,
that, you're
gee.
taking care of children, you're doing the washing, you're doing hemming,
Uh-huh.
you're looking after like the other people in your family,
Right.
and then
Mhm.
you're getting water, you're going to
Oh,
the well. Um I know that prayer and religion are a huge part of just Indian culture in general, but especially in villages, like the temple. And I know like a lot of these very activities, such as getting the water, going to the temple, there is a social aspect, right?
Right.
Like the women do things together. And there, I imagine there's the socializing and the gossiping and
Right.
whatnot
Oh, yeah.
also happens. But I think like the day is filled with like a lot of errands and work. And
What kind of transportation do they have, or do they need transportation? In other words, they don't have a little bus, something, because they walk
yeah,
to the
so
stores. It's
there are
very
bikes.
local.
There are bicycles, and if you're,
Oh,
more affluent, you might have a scooter.
oh,
Cars are not
mm-hmm,
really, cars are a city
mm-hmm,
thing.
mm-hmm.
And then there's, in the novel, they catch a ride on the back of trucks that are making deliveries and kind of going between um, town, cities, like state lines, and they hitch a ride on the back of that if that like gets them a bit farther to where they're trying to go.
Does anyone and then I'll let someone else ask. It's just so interesting. Does anyone kind of make it out of the village, maybe to the city, or?
Oh yeah, lots of people will migrate for either work to, do like day laborers will migrate where like the
Right.
cities where the work is, where there's maybe construction happening. But also education has been and always is a way to just empower and open up opportunities and horizons. And so given the right tools, do well, then education could take you out to higher learning in a city.
And it was also fun hearing them talk about school, when they were in school and they were in school
Yeah.
together. So Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
I
you.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
for reading. I hope you continue to enjoy it, or like continue to enjoy hearing
No,
it and
I
stuff.
on it. I now that I have to go back and finish it because there's too many loose ends I don't know about, and I don't like that unfinished business.
Mhm.
Oh, well,
And it's so gossipy and fun.
good.
All that I have to find out some of those methods, you know, those methods that we don't want to
Yeah.
say.
Mhm.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Next we'll go to Marilyn. Thank you.
Well, I just lost a thought that I had, but probably something you said, Susan, about methods. Oh, I finished the book. I loved it. Those last couple of chapters, fantastic. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
know, I really your rewriting really paid off. I think, you tied it up beautifully. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
It was hard, I'm sure. This is kind of a question, kind of a comment, but I felt like not all the women were totally supportive of each other. And I just wondered,
Mhm.
is that because they're, in your opinion, or, whatever you think, you're more closer to that than I am. But do you think that's because there's so much oppression that it's sort of like, well, I'm oppressed, so you need to be oppressed. It's kind
Yeah,
of that kind of,
I do.
or was it a jealousy thing, like,
Yes, all of
that
that.
was,
Yeah, all of it, and so many more things too. Like when there's a competition for resources, the mentality becomes I want or I need, so you can't, as opposed to, well, we don't have this, so why don't we go out and get it for us, right? There's that switch. So I wanted you nailed it, like especially in the beginning, there's a lot of distrust and there's a lot of like our begrudging relationships formed, right? As opposed to actual friendships. The friendships happen later because I wanted that trajectory, right? The journey of Saloni and Geeta, and even and to a great extent Farah, because she's got her own things going on. And I wanted to show like the juxtaposition of when you start from a place of distrust and resentment, and then you get into the mentality of like, well, we can, and then the difference, right? Like the isolation versus the empowerment. But jealousy is absolutely a factor, and so is oppression, in the sense of like, well, if we're stood on, if someone's standing on our necks, we often take that out on someone else that we can below us, and that's very human, but it's also very unproductive.
yeah, yes, I really liked your treatment of the women's relationships and the male dominance and male patriarchy and the domestic abuse. I thought when it, just like someone else said, I think it was Sharon said, oh, I thought this was going to be a funny ha 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 book, and then it turned into a much more serious, there was a serious tale there behind it, and but there was humor to get us through the darkness, and I appreciated that. And I like the way that you treated the dog. The dog had a purpose. He wasn't there. He wasn't just there for good feels. And I like the way you wove that in. I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not trying to, kind of be quiet on
Thank
that.
you.
But yeah, I like the way that you treated the dog. He had a role, and he he played his part very well. Thank you. I really
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's very kind. I'm glad.
Oh, first I saw Sharon made a comment she's going to share. She said she's going to enjoy the last two chapters now that you heard your journey towards that. And let's see what this says. The part that she's at just flowed very quickly. I think that's what
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else
Thank you.
have?
Yeah, I hope you do.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions here? Because I can go back and there's something else I was thinking about to ask. So I'm as I said and others said, like we learned so much about this. I mean, being that you've had visited there before, I mean, what did you find that you learned that was like really fascinating that you didn't know about them? That'd be interesting to share with us.
Sorry, I missed where?
When you
Where did I
visited
go?
the area of India, like what would you find was fascinating that you didn't know about
Oh,
India?
honestly, so much, I guess. Hmm. What is, sorry, it's just that like I've like spent all my summers and my winter break vacations since I was my whole like life, and then I lived there for 5 years. I'm trying to think of like it's different. I don't know, and I'm sure it is fascinating, but it's just like you get so used to seeing something. I think I think this is interesting. I actually used it, and I'm using it in my current manuscript. In India, if a peacock, because the peacock is the national bird, and it is they're concerned about the decreasing numbers. So in India, when a peacock dies on your property, you have to go to the police station and report the dead peacock. And then they like collect the peacock and they do tests to make sure that there's no foul. I had to do the pun. Wow. There's no foul play. Gotta write that down. I want to use that. And so my dad's neighbor, when I was visiting in India, my dad's neighbor comes in and he's just like very upset, and my dad's like, what's going on? And this guy's like, another peacock died on my lawn. I have to go back to the police station. I'm gonna think something's up. And I thought, why do you have to go to the police station? They're like, oh, and everybody knew, oh, when a peacock dies, you got to go report it. And I was like, that's fascinating. Like in country where you can't really get all, I mean, I know a lot of nations are corrupt, but the police force in India is very notoriously known for being corrupt. So I was like, can't get the police to do their jobs, but they're all crazed about this peacock that died of natural causes in this guy's lawn. And I'm like, wow, okay. I thought that was fascinating with my like, one foot in the east and 1 foot in the west kind of brain. And I thought, okay, this is too weird to not write about. So I kind of incorporated that. And I know that it's not exactly what you're looking for, but that is one example of just things are, wow, that intrigues me.
Nothing changed, sure. Wait, so you said when you went to visit, that was where your mom's family lived? You said over the summers when you went to visit there.
No, both both my parents are from Gujarat, specifically Ahmedabad, and my entire extended family lives there. My father still lives there. My brother was raised there. He came over for university, but until he was 18, he lived in Ahmedabad. So I would go to see my father, see my brother, see my aunts and uncles and all the extended family. It's just my mom and myself in California.
Okay. Okay, so I want to say, well, before I finish, does anyone have any other questions? Oh, Marilyn, did you have something else that you wanted to say? You can go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a comment because we're talking about having to go to the police station. Oh, the police station scene was one of my favorites. I loved.
Oh, good.
That was so good. That was so good.
Thank
And
you.
had you been to a police station? Had you interacted with any police there?
Have I been to a police station? No, I've never been to a police station. I asked the policeman for like directions, but I've never needed to go to a police station. I've seen them in so many films that I
Films,
feel like
yeah,
they all look the same. They all look like the same station. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. And that's the station that I described in that chapter with the the very competent policewoman that we encounter. The
Yeah,
too competent, a little too competent.
That was good. Oh, one more thing I was going to say. So your new book, is it going to take place in a similar type village as this one, or someplace?
Yeah. No, it's going to take place in Ahmedabad, the city.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'll be. There's still research, but there's less because spent a lot of time in Ahmedabad. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to say thank you so much for doing this virtual.
I have a quick question, Michelle.
Susan,
I have a quick question. In your next book, as I said before, there were some words that we're not familiar with, like, and certain foods, I guess. Would you ever consider maybe a little glossary. Sometimes authors include that.
Mhm.
Unless, you know, if there are like 20, let's say, or if you
Yeah.
think, in your opinion, that it would help. Like when I saw the word for witch, I had to look it up. But it wasn't the end of the world for me, but that was an important thing to know. I thought what the
Mhm.
word meant. It was just an idea. I don't think there were a
Yeah.
lot of words, but so it was just a question or whatever. And
Yes.
how are we gonna know? How are we gonna know when your next book is out?
I will be, skywriting it. I will be taking out lots of ads. I mean, I think hopefully the word, if it happens, and I hope it does, I think that there'll be cover reveals and
Right.
press things that will get like anticipation up before the
Right.
actual release, because there's about like an
I
18-month lead time before when something's finished versus when it is available for
I
purchase.
always ask authors, because some of my favorite authors, they keep an email list. And when they know their book is coming out, they let us know. So it's
Mhm.
just an idea. And
Yeah.
as I said, some of my favorite authors do that. So that way I know to be on the lookout for it. And it was
Right.
just, you know, things
Yeah.
that I've encountered with authors I like. And I
Oh,
like
thank
you
you.
now because your book was so
Thank
good.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I haven't gotten, because I'm in such a nascent stage right now. I haven't even thought about,
But it's
it
something to
being
think about.
published. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Maybe just relating to that, maybe you could share your Instagram, 'cause I know I follow you on Instagram, so maybe that's
Oh,
if you go on Instagram, I don't know.
Mhm.
yeah. If anybody, my Instagram is just my first and my last name.
Oh,
And so
that's
it's,
good.
yeah, I'm the only one apparently. So it's very convenient. Yeah. And then, yeah, I'm sure I would be, you know, posting about when
Mhm.
and if that happens for the sophomore novel.
Mhm. Very good. So if there's no more questions at this point, I will conclude. Thank you, Parini,
Thank
for
you.
your author visit with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you for the
Also
excellent
glad-
questions.
Thank you for coming.
And I just wanted to say, thank you again for interviewing. We all learned so much, and as the others said as well. And I hope if you haven't read it yet, you'll go to your library to check out this book or buy it at your favorite bookstore. And just to let you know, next month, November 8th, I'll be interviewing Claire Jimenez, who wrote her debut novel, What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez. And thanks again, Parini. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Good
What
night.
did you say the book is, Michelle? I didn't
Oh,
clearly hear
What
that.
Happened to Ruthie Ramirez?
Ricky.
Oh, Ruthie. Ruthie.
Oh, Ruthie. What happened to Ruthie Ramirez?
Mhm.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you,
night.
Michelle.
Take care.
Michelle, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a good night.
You do so much.